My name is Joe McGloin, and I was born in County Donegal in 1930. I immigrated to Scotland in 1944, 1945, and I stayed there for a couple of years, and then I moved down to England and got into steelwork. I stayed in England for about around 50-something, and then I immigrated to Canada. But on the immigration trip to Canada, I booked a flight, I booked a trip on Canada Lines to sail out of Liverpool. We got on the boat, the tugboats went on strike, and I sat in the dock for nearly another 10 days before we got to Liverpool, before we got to Montreal. So after we got a trip to Montreal, when I arrived in Montreal, then I took a train from Montreal to Toronto. So after that, in the morning, I picked up my bags and went down at the coffee shop, got a coffee, and went chased down where the bus was. I took a bus to Hamilton, Ontario. I arrived in Hamilton in the afternoon, and then I went to look for a place. I had no address to go to but the YMCA. Arrived at the YMCA, and I chased the guy down, and I said, any chance of getting a room for the night? Oh, you can't come in here unless you know somebody. I said, I don't know anybody. I said, I just arrived here. I said, you have a manager here? Oh, he said, let me get you somebody. So the manager come out, he looked at me, he says, you can only stay for 1 day, sir. I'll let you have 1 day, 1 night, and that's it. And you'll have to be out after that. So I thanked him, and I said, well, if I get 1 night, I'm in heaven. Because I have a bed and a place to put my head down. So that was my first night in Canada. So after that, I got the next morning, I'm going down in the lobby, and there's a couple of fellas from Belfast, and I'm asking him, saying, how's it going? Oh, Jesus, you come at the wrong time. Everybody's going home. He said, there's no work out here in Canada right now. So anyway, I said, well, I got to go to the unemployment office and sign up. That's the first thing you have to do. But I want to get a room and board or get a room someplace. So this little Belfast guy says to me, I'll tell you, Paddy, he said, there's a lady up there, she might take you and she might not take you because she's the other side of the fence. That meant she was a Protestant lady. And she might take you. If you're Scotch, you have no problem. But if you're a Paddy, you might not get in. So he gave me her address, and I went up to see her anyway. And she said, well, I have a room in the basement. I let you have a room in the basement, but only for a couple of weeks because I don't keep anybody too long, more than 2 weeks. I said, well, 2 days will do me if I get in. So after that, I talked to her, and I went down to the unemployment office and registered for unemployment. And then I was on my way after that. I said, that's it. After arriving in Canada, for some time, there was no work to be had, no place. But the lady said there's a steel company that hire every so often. And I took the bus and went down there in the morning about 5 o'clock. Turned to get off the bus, and I looked around. Must have been about 500 people ahead of me lined up, looking for work. There was every nationality in that line. Probably there was Swedes, there was Italians, there was Danes, there was anybody you could mention. There's a young fellow standing in front of me. I said, I'm asking him, I said, what's the chance of getting work like this? He said, listen, some days they hire 20, some days they hire 50, and some days they don't hire anybody. So after chatting to him for about an hour, I said, well, there's probably not much good work going on here today. I said, I might as well go on home. Oh, no, he said, hang in there, Joe. He said, because there might be something. So I stood for a while. So later on, this gentleman comes out, and he's got a young fellow with him, and he's got a pen and paper and a pad. So he walks down the aisle, and he says, Pat, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? What do you do? So he comes here, so what are you? I said, I'm a steel worker. I said, oh, give him a chit. So that's right there. And then I went, first thing I had to do was go get a doctor's, a medical thing, check out, see how before they even employ you. So after you go to the doctor, then he gives you a chit, go back and get an employment card. Then my sister came up to visit probably in the summer of '56. She lived here in Connecticut, in Hartford, yeah. So she had said to me, why don't you come on down to us in the States? I said, not really. I said, I'm doing all right here, Oh, she said, I think you'd like it down here. But that's somewhere, she had this friend come up with her. It was John Armstrong, which is a family, they're still around here yet. So anyway, he was there, and he was going on to see a brother in Montreal. So he said, I'll see if you get to Hartford. And I said, well, let's see what the thing. So I filled out the paperwork, and about probably 3 months later, I got a call from the was at the immigration authorities in Niagara Falls to stop by. They wanted to interview me. Well, I was all the way up in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. That's about 300 miles. So I had to leave the job up there and come back to Hamilton, and then take a day and go to Niagara Falls to the immigration authorities. So after immigration, the guy interviewed me in paperwork and said, we'll come back, we'll let you know and notify you in a couple of weeks what you got. So about a month later, I got another note from saying, you've cleared to go if you want to go to immigrate to the States, you're all set to go. So now that was the biggest move I had. So I had some furniture and some odds and ends to get rid of, and I said we had plans to move to Hartford, Connecticut. When I arrived here, I went to my aunt lived on Humphrey Street off Hillside Avenue down in Hartford. And we arrived there about probably 11 o'clock in the morning in a taxi. She had a taxi waiting for her. She was leaving to go to Florida the same time. I got off one taxi and she got into another. And she was going to Florida, and she said, I'll see you in a couple of months. She was heading to Florida. In the meantime, my sister had lived up the street with another aunt of mine, and she came down and I said, well, I'll get you settled in. So after a couple of weeks, I got an apartment of my own on Wethersfield Avenue. So I got an apartment up on the second floor there. And who do you think was the neighbor? She was a Mrs. Clancy. And she said, where are you from? Oh my God, I said, she was from Offaly originally. She was related to Paddy Clancy here that used to belong, a member of the club here for years. And she said, oh my God, she said, another Irishman coming in here, you know. So many, I got tied up with her and got to know her. And she was a great lady. She said, come in. Oh, come on in. I put on the pot and have a cup of tea, and she used to make a big cake of Irish bread or something like that. When I arrived in Hartford, I got settled. I went to the Union Hall then, and it was on Trumbull Street. The business agent there, his name was Sox Connors, an Irishman from Pennsylvania. So I'm looking for work. I asked him, I said, I'm looking for a job. I was going to, oh yeah, I have some work for you. Hang on a minute. So he had to put the cigarette down and he checked the book and he gave me a referral slip to go out to Cunard High School in West Hartford for this City Ironworks. Part of they were doing a gymnasium building in the Cunard High School in West Hartford. So I went out there and I worked out there for about 3 months. But leaving the hall downstairs and talking to 3 or 4 ironworkers waiting, standing out smoking a cigarette, and I said, well, the guys, how's there any other work around here? And one of the guys says to me, go down to the powerhouse in Middletown. There's a job down there and the guy's looking for help and he said they might hire you. So waited, the security guy said, yeah, wait for a while, I'll talk to someone, you get the timekeeper or something. So anyway, about a half an hour later, this timekeeper came out, he said, I said, I'm looking for work, how's the job? Oh yeah, he said, come in, I'll give you the form, fill it out. And so went to work the next day. I recall being downstairs in the Grove Street, or Grove Street at the Irish American Club. There was a big hassle going on about moving to Glastonbury. I recall different debates about why are we moving out to Glastonbury, it's too far away, we'd never be fit to get out there. Why under God are we going to Glastonbury? There's no bus service out, there's nothing out there. Well, anyway, finally after a couple of months, I finally settled and bought this place and got started. Jimmy Golden was a carpenter, well-known carpenter here for a long time in the area. And he took on the job to build it. And I recall they got this Dave McLean was a contractor builder here, and they got him to dig the foundation that got started. Then we used to come down and help Jimmy with the wood and put some of we put the framing up on the bottom first. With the framing that you're sitting on here is all steel on the bottom. Put down a couple of evenings, put that up. And then after I got the walls up, then we'd come in a couple of evenings and put up the trusses and put some stuff like that up for them, you know. It helped them out, but they only got a couple of hours in the evening time. The first thing you know, it was getting dark, you know. So a lot of times then he had regular help working with them as well, you know, while the job was going on. After I got organized here for a couple of years, I became a foreman for this gamble, the City Ironworks paper, for a lot of work in them. And a lot of times we had something going on, I'd bring a couple of the guys down after night, have them come down here and give Jimmy a hand with some of the work, you know, spread the timber and do some, you know, some lifting that from, you know. But the biggest thing was that piece of rail and getting that up there, because they had no access in there. They wanted that right away for safety, because once they got the hall opened up, they had that side door for the metal framing that. We were down at night time and took that down from that church on Grove Street and brought it down here, and then we finally got it put up there. So that was a piece of work that probably originally by the Gamble family that manufactured that, you know, from stores, you know. Quite a few that came down to help. If I recall, now there was one particular young fellow that was in with Joe Riley. He passed away, and there was a few more of the guys, you know. There was a big fellow here, Pat O'Connor, and a few of them then. But they're all deceased now. I don't think there's anybody left in the area that you can recall of, you know. Well, the ironworkers, yeah, they're a great group together. The ironworkers known as camaraderie. They take care of one another. They opened up and said, once this hall got going here, they started having their meetings here. Originally, he used to have their meetings up on Park Street. So finally, after this opened up, this was one of the first stops. And they had a great Irish with the ironworkers here for years. For the last 50 years, they've been coming here in this hall, you know, in members and non-members of the ironworkers come, all the support of the club. We used to have what do you call it, the parade here. We had a beam that we used to haul on the parades here for years for the ironworkers. I don't know if you've seen any picture of it. Over the years, I became a foreman for some of the different companies. Well, one of the major companies was this City Ironworks that were owned by the Gamble family. And I went to work for them, and mostly all bridge work. One of the first major projects I ran this work was the Waterbury Interchange, Route 84. And that was in 1963, 64. We'd done a job there I had probably 10 Irishmen from here that used to work with me. I had Keogh and Keenan and Droney, and I don't know, maybe many more of them. But I had them all on the gang, working as members, as work crew, and also members of the Irish American Home with me. So when I traveled like that, a lot of times, if I had a job going, they would come with me. Like I would go to Boston, we had work in Boston, some of the boys, I would take them up there, Pat Sears, Keogh and Keenan, and then even to Washington, D.C., where I worked down here, I had Pat Sears, Keenan, Keogh. We were doing work at the Metro in Washington, D.C. Yeah, and their children later came to work for me later on. I would mention one particular youngster was Pat Jr., Pat Sears Jr., he came to work for. But I remember when his dad came first to work as an apprentice, I was doing a job at the Phoenix building in Hartford. I was connecting there. And I remember Pat coming in, he had that Irish program. I said, Pat, where are you from? Oh, he said, I'm from Kerry. And I said, I at the time didn't recognize, listening to that heavy Kerry brogue, you know. I said, he had just started a couple of days before that on the job. And we were probably up about 7 or 8 floors at the time of the building. And I remember meeting him, and then later on he came to work with me on different projects that I had. But most of the time around here, I ran a lot of work, a lot of bridge work, a lot of heavy rigging. I worked for this Bechtel Corporation out of California. They're from somewhere, I can't think what the name is, but they're a big outfit. I done a lot of work with them. But mostly all the time I was working nearly all bridge work, most of the time that I done. Like I worked on the Gold Star, and the new one when they put it up, that was in 1971, 72. And then we went in and took the old one down piece by piece and put it back up again. I enjoyed the music and the singing and the camaraderie. And we have done some real great sing-songs here. There was a bunch of the boys that came from the Iron Islands with Joe Davin and Tony Keneally and Eddie, and the Armstrong's family. We used to have some great, wonderful nights down here. With Pat Mohan, I love Pat Mohan, the wife I think is still here, and she's a member still here of the club. We used to have some wonderful times. Sunday afternoon, we'd be standing on the floor downstairs and have a sing-song for 2 or 3 hours, and somebody say, I just get ready to go home. No, we haven't run out of singers yet. But I have to believe that one of the finest singers, in the conversation when you bring it up about people singing, Eddie Keneally's wife, Koch was a beautiful Irish singer, and she had the most beautiful voice singing Gaelic songs. Yeah, you could sit all day and listen to her. And I often wondered, nobody ever had a recording of her. I often thought about that years later, that it would have been a pleasure to listen to her singing in Gaelic. His mom was big in here for years. She was always involved in the cooking, Saturday dinners, Saturday night dinners. She was always down here on a Friday night peeling potatoes, and she'd leave him home here and say, get him to bed early because he's go swimming in the morning. You know, that's the first thing she would say to me. Get him to bed early. No TV tonight. Go to bed early in the morning. Get him going. You know. So she was very involved in the club for all her life. The other thing was the football, the Irish football. She was very involved in the football. She would go down to Gaelic Park on Sundays, no matter what happened, no matter what the rain weather was like. We're going to Gaelic Park on Sunday mornings to get ready, and we're away. You know, no messing around, no nothing. You know. This is my son, Rory. I'd like to introduce him.
Thanks. My name is Rory McGloin. I've been a member of the Irish American Home for many years now, and grew up around here. This was my childhood playground when I was at school, and yeah, very happy memories down here as a child. How did I get involved? I don't think I had much choice in the matter. So for me, I was born in 1984 to my father Joe and my mother Mary. My mother Mary would have been coming down here before, having met my father. So Mary McGovern was, an involved member, and my father was an involved member. And I grew up in a home where the Irish home was just part of the fabric of who we were. Like, this is where we went on a Saturday and a Saturday to enjoy the dinner dances. I remember being a youngster, and my mother would be peeling spuds maybe or something. So yeah, there was always a job to be done. Maybe you were washing glasses or doing something. And on a Sunday, we were always here. Gaelic football games would be on, and that was a big part. My mother was a big GA fan, and a proud cabin woman, and we would come down and watch the games together. And one of my first great memories was in 1992. Donegal made it to Ireland, and we came down here to watch the game, and that would have been a big deal, and Donegal won on the day. And those kind of memories become really impressionable because they last forever with you, and they kind of have an imprint on who you are. And so yeah, as a child, just being down here, and one of the things I loved about coming to the club as a child was there was kids from all the towns over. So sometimes when you're a kid in America, I think you just become friends with the kids that are in your town. For me, it was truly like an experience to come down here, and there were kids from Wethersfield and West Hartford and from Newington and New Britain, and so you had a different set of friends, and that was really special because you knew on a Sunday you were coming down and you were looking to see who was here. And of course, our great facility and our great pitch, it was many happy memories of running around out there playing ball and meeting all the kids from all around. As I grew older, unfortunately, we lost my mother leaving here one night, and so that was tragic for the whole community. That kind of defined part of my path in life. It was my father and I, and so after we lost my mother, I probably always knew that I felt like I wanted to come back to this community if I could and give back and honor her legacy. That's really what has driven. You ask about my involvement. That's a big piece of it, to make sure that her name's not forgotten, and I can do my job. So throughout my early 20s, when I'd come home, I kind of still had a huge interest in Gaelic football, but my wife and I, we moved to Colchester, and it gave me the opportunity to only be 20 minutes down the road, and I knew at that point that I wanted to really immerse myself in the Hartford GA. There were some boys that were, Johnny Murphy and Jimmy Droney and Stephen Miskell. Those guys were involved in helping to kind of rejuvenate the club while I was away at college, and came back, and we were fortunate to have a men's football team at that stage and getting the hurling going. And for me, I just took to it. It was a place for me to share my love of Gaelic football, like huge passion for it. I had a chance as a youngster to play for my mother's club in Curla as a kid in the summers, and so I wanted to share my knowledge and passion and enthusiasm for it. I love the game. I'll always love the game. And then like one thing leads to another, and the team started to grow, and we were kind of always transitioning in eras for many years. We were playing up in Boston for my era, and the games were difficult, and you're playing really good teams out of Ireland, and you kind of had to really make a decision here as a club, like, are we going to do this? Like, are we genuinely going to try to compete with these really great clubs up in Boston? And I remember sitting downstairs one night, and there was only maybe 7 or 8 of us left at this time. Must have been about 2004. 2014, 2015, and we basically all said, look, we're going to do this. And I would think that that was kind of a bit of a modern turning point for us in some regards, because we said we were going to double down. We're 100% staying in the league, and we've got to get competitive. And I look back at that and think to myself personally, and just in my journey, in my story, that was a defining moment, because we said we were going to stay. And I look at today, it's 2026 as we're recording this. We had over 110 senior players registered last year. We have almost 100 youth players. We have 4 codes now available. I think we're a real testament to ourselves, and I think we've done a great job of honoring the legacy of the men and women that made this club what it is, and I personally try to instill that in the players that I coach and the players that I play with, to say this isn't just about us. There's a lot of people that came before us to even make this possible. So when we go play, it's just our one part in contributing to the history. In 2013, my daughter Mairead was born, and of course, like myself, GA, she was going to have to grow up with it. It was a part of who she was, and she was turning about 9 years of age, and I would look out on the sidelines on a Saturday, and the men would be playing, and I see all the girls, and I'd be thinking to myself, like, they don't really have a team to look up to. Like, where do they go and play when they're 16 and 17? I knew that I had that always in my mind, that if I had a chance, I'd come back and play for Hartford as my club, and I did, and it was a dream fulfilled. But when I saw my daughter, I thought, well, how do we keep the ladies around? Like, how do we keep them involved? We had a couple women who had played in places like New York or places up in Boston, so we had 1 or 2, players to help bring the thing together. But the first night we had a training session with 6 or 7. My wife was one of them. Maggie Sayers was one of them. One of the grandchildren of somebody that Joe was talking about earlier and working. So that was a cool moment. And little by little, we started putting a team together, and in 2025, last year, 3 years in the league, we won a junior championship up in Boston with a predominantly American team, American-born players competing against mostly Irish-born players, and that's a testament. And like, for anybody that's played the game in America, they know that the standard here, particularly in New England, it's challenging, and that was a great moment. Just we're sitting here just with my dad. That was a good moment for me. Obviously, Mairead got to be there and hold the trophy that day, but I was probably spending most of the ride home thinking about my mother and thinking about how proud she'd be as a woman here. That summer that I turned 10, after I lost my mom, the Armstrongs were out here. There was Larry Armstrong, and Eileen was here, and John Armstrong, and his brother was at the homestead in Tyrone, and there was basically kind of a call to arms. They were like, what's this kid going to do? And so the decision was made that I was going to go back to Ireland, and it was these Armstrongs folks, Eamon Armstrong, who would have been John's brother, and John, who had met up in Canada to bring the whole story full circle, took me into their home, and they became, I always say, I lost one mother, but I gained many more along the way, some here in Glastonbury and some back in Ireland, and I was very fortunate that, from my experience, I think one of the things I would share is I had a chance to spend extended periods of time in Ireland. Ireland is my second home, and it was a place that I was raised on those values and those virtues, and it was many of the men and women that took me into their home, whether it was for a week or 6 weeks or sometimes, all summer. And I tried to, do my best to bring that here. And I think, as I look back, probably bringing a bit of myself from here back to them as well. And it's funny because it's all connected, and it's nice to be back here and to celebrate this in a way. Yeah, it was always fun. There was always, and I think, one of the things too. So I grew up, music was important, singing was important. Now, I wouldn't fancy myself to be a singer, but Joe and his brothers and his sister, and they all were great singers, and, sing-song culture was something that you wanted to be a part of. And I can tell stories about, I used to grow up and I would see them on a Sunday afternoon, and they'd be singing, and you kind of knew at some point as a child that, like, your day was going to come. And I kind of remember thinking to yourself, like, you better be ready, because, like, the Irish culture was like, once they're coming at you, you better have something. So I would stay up nights and listen to cassette tapes on my headphones, and I'd listen to Paddy Riley, and I'd listen to the Wolf Tones, and I wanted to learn as much as I could. And to this day, like, I feel like I know the words to so many songs, but it was inspired because it was part of who we were, and it wasn't karaoke, and it wasn't reading off your phone. It was genuinely like being connected to your culture. And I remember, going back to the pubs in Ireland to sing songs and feeling like you could contribute, and that was really what connected me here. And it was just such a special thing to be a part of, and to me it was normal. Like, that was just how it was, and I realized that it wasn't maybe as normal as I thought it was.
It actually was an education that you could not buy.
So, Mairead, of course, right there in the name, and so myself, my wife Megan, as soon as Mairead could kick a football, got involved in youth and was proud to coach the youth organization and get involved in the youth sports down here. I think the other thing is trying to be a champion, like an ambassador almost for the Irish American community here, whether it's through business, my time up at UConn. I think, one of the things my father instilled in me and my mother instilled in me was that, we're proud to be Irish. And, hearing my dad's stories coming over, you weren't always necessarily welcome. Maybe it was a tough go for some of these guys that came over early. I think there's a responsibility that you teach the next generation, what came before us. And I think I've always been nostalgic by nature, and so the work that I do in storytelling, in fact, and my passion for communication, I think actually stems from the Irish culture of having a conversation, listening to people, connecting with them, offering them something of value. And I don't think there's very few places that I don't go that I don't share. I'm proud to be Irish, and I'm proud to be from the Irish American home in Glastonbury, and I tell people who we are and what we do. And in terms of staying involved in the Irish American home, I think, you're always looking to lead where you can, and I think for me, sports, in particular Gaelic football, was a place that I thought I could contribute. I think everybody tries to volunteer in their own ways, and for me, that was I always said there are certain things that I would like to do, and if it's coaching youth players or getting games, that would hopefully be my, and my uncles played here. Joe didn't mention this, but the brothers came and played, so I had uncles that played here, and it's pretty cool that I get to be part of that legacy, and I enjoy it, yeah. I've been up at UConn now for 20 years, and one of the things that's interesting to me is students, of course, love to study abroad and go abroad, and I would have been somebody who was quite motivated to see students go to Ireland. But in particular, I was fortunate to spend a lot of time in the north of in Northern Ireland, in the north of Ireland, and that's where many of my friends all migrated to Belfast. And so I think being here at the Irish American Home, we've had members from all over Ireland. Maybe not quite as many as from up in Ulster. And so there's kind of a bit of pride, I think, too, to get people to visit there. And so I was motivated when I was at UConn to see if we could set up an exchange program and get folks going up to Ulster University. And I think that's something where we can continue to deepen our connections. When we look back and we look at the 50s and the 60s and the 70s with the wave of immigration that we saw here in Hartford, we don't see it today. I think that we also have a responsibility here in Connecticut, here in the greater Hartford area, to celebrate our Irish culture so that we make sure that the next generation of immigrants that want to come over, that they know that they're welcome here, that they know it's here. I think there's a lot to be said about Boston and New York, but I don't think we can lose sight of some of these second cities that also provided homes and provided great lives for the men and women that came over. So that was probably one small way that I wanted to go to Ireland and say, hey, we're here in Hartford and you're very welcome here. You'd be proud of that, and you'd be proud too when people do come over into our club and they're welcomed with the hospitality that has been here for as long as we've existed. I think one of the things that this place teaches folks is that everybody has a job to do, that there's a contribution that you can make, whether we're capturing history or whether we're mowing the pitch or whether we're digging the foundation. Whatever your skill set is, the Irish American Home provides a place for you to come and share your skill and share your passion for Irish culture. And that's really, to me, what I learned and what I hope to share with everybody, and hope we keep it going for another 100 years.